Late summer, 1977. The Dunes Casino, Las Vegas. The air is a thick mix of cigarette smoke and cheap gin, but the pit boss at table 4 is totally sober. He is staring at a man who looks more like a graduate student than a big spender. The man is wearing a faded jacket and thick, wire-rimmed glasses. He hasn't touched his drink all night. But in the last hour, this man and his partner have consistently beaten the odds, pulling in several $100s with clinical precision. The pit boss signals security. "Check the wheel," he whispers. They are looking for magnets or a fixed wheel, but everything is perfectly balanced. The eye-in-the-sky cameras zoom in, searching for a cheat. They find nothing. But here is the puzzle making the security chief uneasy. The betting pattern is weird. The man waits until the ball is already screaming around the rim, when the physics of the spin are already set, and only then does he move. He places a modest bet on a specific section of the wheel. The ball drops. He wins again. Over the course of several trips to the desert, this physics student and his team will take roughly $10,000 from Nevada using nothing but a computer hidden in a shoe. This wasn't luck. It was a planned attack on the house edge, using the basic laws of motion. There would be no $1.5 million heist and no dramatic FBI raid, only a group of scientists proving that the most random game in the world was actually a predictable machine. This is the story of Doyne Farmer and the Udemans. This is how they did it. 1975, Santa Cruz, California. Doyne Farmer is a man who thinks in math and science. He is a physics student at UCSC, living in a collective house known as eudaimonia, a group of smart, broke scientists who spend their nights arguing about chaos theory and their days trying to fund their research. To the rest of the world, a roulette wheel is the ultimate sign of chance. To Doyne, it is just a classic physics problem with a gambling license. He realizes that while the casinos claim the game is pure luck, it is actually a closed physical system ruled by Newton's laws. He notices 3 weak spots: the steady, measurable speed of the wheel, the predictable way the ball loses energy to air resistance and friction, and the fact that most tables aren't perfectly level, creating a drop zone where the ball is statistically more likely to fall. Doyne looks at his partner, Norman Packard, and says, "The wheel isn't gambling. It's a machine. And if it's a machine, we can figure it out." They weren't looking to become overnight millionaires in a 72-hour blitz. They wanted to fund a science commune. Doyne goes to a Radio Shack and buys a few $100s worth of computer parts. He decides it's time to take the house edge back. But the question isn't if he could do it. It's how do you do hard physics in a casino without getting caught? Roulette works on a simple idea of chaos. A ball is spun in one direction, the wheel in the other. There are 38 pockets. Most people think the ball bounces randomly until it finds a home. But Doyne realized the ball's path is a matter of basic motion, predictable through the ball's deceleration due to air resistance and friction. To win, he didn't need to know the exact number. He just needed to know which octant, which 1/8 section of the wheel the ball would likely land in to flip the odds. To do this, Doyne and the Eudemons had to build a computer. In 1977, when computers were the size of refrigerators, they built a wearable one from scratch, using a MOS 6502 chip. They spent months in a basement welding parts and miniaturizing the hardware so it would fit into the carved-out sole of a Clark's boot. It was a masterpiece of early wearable tech, consisting of the chip in the sole, toe buttons for input, and vibrating solenoids for output. The method relied on high-pressure timing. As the ball passed a set mark, the tracker would tap their big toe. Click. 1 lap later, another tap. Click. This gave the computer the ball's velocity. A final tap as the zero pocket passed the mark gave the computer the wheel's position. In less than half a second, the chip calculated the physics and sent a vibrating pulse to a bettor, who would receive the signal 1 buzz for section A, 2 for section B, and so on. During the testing phase, the team struggled with the ball's chaotic scatter after hitting the deflectors. They realized they had to fix the code to include how much the ball bounced. Once they added this bounce factor, they achieved a 20% to 27% player advantage. In a game where the house usually holds a 5.26% edge, a 20% advantage is a statistical tidal wave. The house advantage didn't just disappear. For the first time in history, the players had the mathematical upper hand. July 1977, the MGM Grand, 8:14 p.m. Doyne Farmer enters the casino floor, not as a gambler, but as a tracker. Underneath his loose-fitting suit, a complex web of 1970s circuitry is strapped to his body, powered by a 9-volt battery taped firmly to his thigh. 5 minutes later, a second team member, the bettor, drifts toward the same roulette table. They don't exchange a glance. In the eyes of the pit boss, they are strangers. In reality, they are two nodes in a human-computer network designed to dismantle the house edge. 8:18 p.m. The dealer sends the ivory ball on its orbit. It's a blur of white against the polished wood. 8:18:02 p.m. Doyne's big toe presses down inside his Clark's boot. Click. 8:18:04 p.m. The ball completes a revolution. Click. Inside the sole of his shoe, the MOS 6502 microprocessor, the same heart that beats inside the Apple II, wakes up. It isn't guessing, it's calculating. It measures the velocity of the ball against the steady decay of friction and air resistance. 8:18:05 p.m. The calculation is complete. The shoe computer transmits a low-frequency radio signal across the short gap between the teammates. A solenoid hidden against the bettor's skin pulses. It isn't a single number. Physics can't be that precise in a chaotic system. But it's an octant. The signal indicates a specific 45-degree wedge of the wheel where the ball is statistically destined to fall. The bettor doesn't hesitate. They slide a stack of chips onto the numbers within that narrow slice of the wheel. They aren't betting on luck. They are betting on a mathematical certainty. The ball hits the brass diamonds, the deflectors designed to create randomness, and begins its chaotic dance. It rattles, skips over the zero, and drops squarely into the predicted octant. It's a win. To the surrounding crowd, it looks like a lucky streak. To Doyne, it's a successful experiment. However, the house is built on the detection of patterns. The pit boss at the MGM Grand is a veteran of the strip, trained to spot anything that deviates from the normal rhythm of a loser. He watches the bettor's late entry bets. He notices that the chips only hit the felt once the ball is already in motion, the golden window, where the physics are set but the betting is still open. Check the wheel, the boss whispers into his collar. Security begins to tighten the circle. Doyne can feel the eye-in-the-sky cameras zooming in, searching for the telltale signs of a past poster or a card counter. His heart hammers against his ribs. He knows that if a guard brushes against his leg, they'll feel the hard casing of the battery and the wires running down his inseam. Then, the technical reality of 1970s hardware strikes. 8:22 p.m. A malfunction, perhaps caused by a bead of sweat or a loose solder joint, causes the bettor's receiver to short-circuit. Instead of the rhythmic pulses of the octant code, the solenoid begins to vibrate at a high, continuous frequency. It isn't just a signal anymore. It's a heating element. The bettor's face goes pale. The 9-volt battery is dumping its entire charge into the solenoid, and the temperature is skyrocketing. Doyne watches from across the table as his partner's leg begins to twitch involuntarily. The smell of scorched insulation and ozone, the scent of melting electronics, begins to waft from the bettor's shoe. "Are you all right, sir?" a floor manager asks, stepping toward the bettor. "Just a cramp." The bettor grits out through clenched teeth, enduring the sensation of a hot iron being pressed against their foot. They have to cut the power and exit the floor immediately. There is no dramatic high-speed chase, no shootout in the lobby. There is only a quiet, limping retreat into the cool Nevada night. They move to another casino, the Hilton, 8:45 p.m. But the heat follows them. The casinos share information through a private network. 2 men, late bets, consistent section hits. The dealer at the new table has been briefed. He starts calling no more bets earlier and earlier, trying to shut the window before the computer can finish its lap timing. Doyne observes the dealer and realizes a fundamental truth about chaos. Humans are the most predictable part of the machine. In his rush to beat the tracker, the dealer has developed a robotic consistency. He throws the ball at the exact same velocity every single time to stay ahead of the clock. Doyne realizes he no longer needs the computer to time the ball. He only needs to time the dealer's release. By the end of the night, they haven't taken the millions described in the legends. They haven't broken the MGM Grand. But as they count their modest winnings, a few $1,000s that will go toward rent and research, they realize they have done something far more significant. They have proven that the house edge is a mathematical illusion. The winnings aren't a heist, they are a proof of concept. They have successfully turned a $400 Radio Shack project into a master key for the world's most random game. The end of any great heist, or in this case, any great scientific experiment, rarely arrives with the cinematic roar of a police siren or a high-speed chase through the desert. In Hollywood, the collapse is fueled by the desire for just one more win, a final score that pushes the hero too far. But for the Eudaimons, the end arrived with something much more grounded and far more terrifying. The smell of burning flesh and the quiet realization that their engineering couldn't keep up with their intellect. By the late 1970s, Doyne Farmer and his collective of physics students weren't just ghosts in the machine of Las Vegas. They were pioneers who had successfully turned the house edge into a player's advantage. But while the math was immortal, the hardware was failing. For years, the legend of the Eudaimons has been inflated into a story of a $1.5 million heist, complete with 2 a.m. FBI raids and suitcases overflowing with cash. The reality of the fall was far less explosive but much more significant. The collective had spent years in their shared house in Santa Cruz, a place they called eudaimonia, perfecting a shoe-based computer that could predict the landing zone of a roulette ball. They weren't hunting for a single, life-changing jackpot at the MGM Grand. They were scientists conducting a long-term field study across more than 11 different casinos in Las Vegas, Reno, and Lake Tahoe. They played small, stayed quiet, and treated the casino floor like a laboratory. The tension, however, was real. While they were watching the wheel, the casinos were slowly beginning to watch them. It wasn't that the pit bosses understood the physics. It was that they understood rhythm. Security teams and gaming commission agents had begun to notice a peculiar quirk among a specific group of players. Every time a member of the collective sat at a table, there was a subtle metronomic tapping. Inside a carved-out Clark's boot, a toe would move in a steady pattern, marking the velocity of the ball and the rotor. It was a physical manifestation of a digital calculation, a bridge between the silicon in a sole and the wood of a wheel. The eye in the sky didn't see a computer, but it saw a pattern that wasn't luck. The project didn't end with a kicked-in door or a team of agents storming a motel room. There was no dramatic FBI raid on July 19, 1977, and there were no bags of seized millions. The collapse was internal. The technical reality of 1970s wearable tech was that it was volatile and unshielded. The impossible moment that truly ended the project happened on the casino floor when a female member of the group, acting as the bettor, felt a sudden, searing pain in her foot. A solenoid, the tiny device meant to vibrate against her skin to signal the winning octant, had short-circuited. It didn't just malfunction, it began to dump the entire charge of a 9-volt battery into a single point on her sole. She stood there, frozen in the middle of a high-stakes environment, forced to maintain the poker face of a casual tourist while the device literally burned a hole into her skin. The smell of scorched insulation and ozone began to waft from her shoe. She couldn't scream, and she couldn't run. She had to calmly excuse herself from the table and limp toward the exit, knowing that if she were searched, the wires running up her leg would be enough to land her in a back room with no cameras. That incident was the turning point. The Eudaimons realized that the physical risk of their malfunctioning hardware, combined with the growing suspicion of the pit bosses, was starting to outweigh the modest rewards. When the team finally disbanded and tallied their spoils of war, the numbers were a far cry from the $1.5 million of the legend. After years of development, travel expenses, and high-stress casino runs, the group walked away with roughly $10,000 in total profit. It was enough to prove the theory, but not enough to fund the scientific commune they had dreamed of. They hadn't broken the bank in a single night. They had conducted a successful yet grueling proof of concept that left them exhausted and, in some cases, physically scarred. The legal aftermath was also far less dramatic than the fictional versions claim. There were no 12-hour interrogations in sterile rooms and no slammed loafers on interrogation tables. In 1977, Doyne Farmer was actually operating in a massive legal gray area. The Nevada statutes at the time defined cheating very specifically as the physical alteration of a game's outcome, using magnets, sliding dice, or shortchanging a dealer. Doyne hadn't done any of that. He had simply observed a public event and used a tool to calculate the probability faster than a human could. He wasn't changing the result, he was predicting it. Because he hadn't physically interfered with the wheel or the ball, he hadn't actually committed a crime under the laws of the era. However, the shoe computer did leave a permanent mark on the industry. While there was no $120 million emergency overhaul of casino equipment, there was a fundamental shift in how Las Vegas viewed security. The casinos realized that their greatest threat wasn't a mobster with a gun or a dishonest dealer skimming off the top. The greatest threat was a person with a math problem. Within a few years, the Nevada state legislature passed laws making it a felony to use any mechanical or electronic device to project the outcome of a game. This Udemon law effectively ended the era of the wearable computer in the gambling world. Casinos began to slowly update their equipment, replacing wooden parts with more consistent metal alloys and redesigning the deflectors on the wheel to introduce artificial chaos. They were trying to defeat the math that Doyne had mastered. They realized that their house advantage was not a law of physics, but a mathematical trick that only worked as long as the player remained slower and less informed than the machine. Doyne Farmer eventually left the world of underground gambling behind, but he didn't leave the math. He transitioned into a legendary career in academia, moving from the physics of roulette to the physics of global markets. He eventually became a world-renowned professor at Oxford, specializing in complexity and chaos theory. He proved that the same principles he used to beat the dunes, the idea that hidden patterns exist within seemingly random systems, could be applied to the most complex structures in the world. He traded the shoe computer for advanced models of econophysics, proving that logic is the ultimate master key, whether you're standing at a roulette table or a stock exchange. To this day, the legend of the Udemons is a staple of both physics lectures and casino security briefings. It serves as both a warning and a goal. The story represents a massive shift in how we view the concept of randomness. Doyne Farmer proved that nothing in the physical world is truly random if you have enough data points and a processor fast enough to connect them. He demonstrated that the house doesn't always win, it just counts on the fact that you won't do the math. They didn't need $1 million heist to prove it. They just needed a shoe, a chip, and the courage to look for the pattern in the chaos.